What's up? How's it going? I am great. I'm excited. I just got back from a week on the road and I'm heading back for another week starting tomorrow. And I'll be going to, let's see, Heidelberg in Ohio. I'll be going to Virginia, Iowa, back to Wisconsin. And so check it out. Tour dates are below. Hope to see you in some city. The road was awesome, and people in South Dakota and Wisconsin brought me cupcakes on my birthday, SpongeBob cupcakes. So thank you for making me feel loved. And there was no top comment from last week about what people wanted to know, but one of the main things that people have asked is if I could explain my writing process a little bit. And as a tangent to that, someone wanted to know how I deal with writer's block. And those are two things that I think about a lot. So that's what I'm going to be talking about this week. So I write several different styles of things, and the ones that are most visible online are my poetry and my rap. And I approach the two sort of differently because in my poetry and in spoken word in general, I think that there's a gravitation towards pieces that are centered around a message and or a premise of some sort. And sometimes my songs are a little bit more free flowing and they can hop from one idea to the next. But with a poem, I have a strong premise before I even sit down to write. For instance, my Lisp poem, I know that I want to attack the subject of my Lisp, and I know that I want to do it in a way that where the form draws attention to the subject matter. So the idea of using alliteration isn't just a coincidence, it's also built into the message of the piece. So once I know that that's the function of the piece, then I start what's called a free write. And for those of you who've never done a free write before, a free write is where you're not censoring yourself based on the quality of your material. You're just trying to put your pen to the paper and write as much as you possibly can. And it's great for a couple of reasons. First of all, it deals with writer's block because once you have embraced free writing, you never have writer's block again. And I think a lot of times people believe they have writer's block, but what they are doing is censoring themselves because they think that the ideas that they're getting on the page aren't good enough. And the fact of the matter is, you can't sit down and say, I want the next line that I write to be the most genius, best line that I ever write in the world. Because that's not a great way to come up with good material. But what's great about a free write is it doesn't matter if your ideas are good or if they're bad, you're allowing yourself a lane to get to ideas that might be good by going through ideas that might not be so good. But the thing is, you don't have to share work with people just because you write it down. And so when I write my first initial free write on a poem, I might come up with 8 pages and like 3 lines of it might get used. I toss everything else that I don't like out, and it's not like that makes you a bad writer. What makes you a good writer is knowing what's good and then selecting that and then using that and showing it to people. And so maybe I get 3 good lines out of my free write, maybe I get 12, maybe I get almost a whole piece. Whatever I get that I like, I keep, and I cut everything else that I don't feel like is a strong idea. And I want every line to have a strong idea in it. I wouldn't keep a line as filler. I would only keep a line if it's part of the framework of the piece. For instance, it sets up a beginning, an end, a crucial turning point in the piece. So it's like the framework, or if it's a line that's so great that I just can't throw it out. And so once I have those tent poles for the piece, I usually come up with a beginning, an end. I know 2/3 of the way through the piece it's going to shift in some way. Then I have my outline, and then I start filling it in with transitions. I smooth things out. I see if it's heavy on one section or if I haven't addressed a point on another. And so then I start filling it up and making sure that it's cohesive. And then I have a second draft, and that has most of the lines and ideas that I want. And then I do a polish, and then I start practicing the performance of it. And then I work in all of the gestures and articulations, and stuff might change a little bit. I might update it later, but that's my general process for writing a poem. For writing rap, it's a little different because I almost always have the music first. And I have a file on my computer that's my idea graveyard that has all of the subjects for songs and poems that I want to write but haven't gotten around to yet. So I'm never at a loss for ideas. I've always got 6 things that I'd like to write but don't have time for, and So maybe I get a beat and I think, and I go through my idea graveyard and I say, oh wow, this beat really fits perfectly with this thing that I wanted to write for a while. And sometimes I listen to a beat and I know immediately what I want to write about and the feeling that it gives me. And then I just start freestyling and seeing what works, seeing what flow works on top of the beat, and I just start trying to come up with lines and couplets and different rhyme schemes that work on top of it. And you know, unlike a poem where I have a Word document where stuff can move and I take a line and I put it up, I put it down, I shift things around, it doesn't really work that way for my process with writing hip hop because it's so much about the continuity and the flow of 16 bars that you can't really, you can sort of get away with mixing matching lines, but you I really like to write it top to bottom, so from the beginning of the verse to the end of the verse. And so I just sit down and I figure out, I don't have a really quick writing process. I don't just jot it down. I still sit for minutes and hours and rack my brain about what line to come next. But it's not like the spoken word where it's all moving around. I hope that addressed some of your concerns about writer's block. I will say that it's not going to be as easy for everybody as it is for others, but I do believe that the main root of writer's block is us thinking that what we have to come up with isn't good enough. That's just never true. You know, you don't have to tell people your deepest, darkest secrets, but there's no shame in writing them down and seeing what comes of it. I hope that this was helpful for you guys, and if you do have questions, let me know because I'm answering the ones that get the top votes, and I'll be back to answer next week. And your t-shirts are in the mail to me, and once they come to my house, they'll be in the mail to you. Thank you so much. Have a good one.